In 2022, we celebrate 130 years of HBCU football. On December 27th, 1892, Livingstone and Biddle College, now known as Johnson C. Smith University, played in Salisbury, North Carolina, with Biddle winning 5-0. Over time, HBCU football has evolved. HBCU football's popularity continues to rise. Millions attend games each year and millions more watch on television. The HBCU bands provide some of the top entertainment in the country. Over that time, some of the best players to ever play in the National Football League played at HBCUs. Every Monday through Friday on the HBCU Football Daily Podcast, national radio and television host Donal Ware takes a look at what's happening in HBCU football and talks with coaches, players, administrators, and media about the 2022 season. Make sure you join the conversation on social media by using the hashtag HBCU130. Now, here's your host, Donal Ware.
You got it locked to the HBCU Football Daily Podcast for today, Wednesday, December 7th. I'm Donal Ware. It's the Hump Day edition of the HBCU Football Daily Podcast, and I apologize that we haven't been on. We weren't able to come on with you Monday or Tuesday as we wind down the football season. We don't want this to be sporadic, but there's a lot of things that we have going on. We have our report cards that are going on with Box to Row. We have the upcoming All-America team that's going to be released. So there's just a lot going on in HBCU football and with Box to Row. So we want you to have patience with us, but there is plenty to look at on our website at boxtorow.com. Also, if you've missed these podcasts over this season or really the last several seasons, you can always go back to our website and check those out. So we got a lot going on. First of all, right, we had a football game on Saturday, the SWAC championship game, the game in which Jackson State defeated Southern 43-24. Now, with respect to that game, it was sort of a runaway. Jackson State was running away with that game. And then there was a point where Southern was able to close the game to within 12 points in the third quarter. But then Jackson State just scored one more touchdown, and Southern really couldn't get anything going from there. I think so obviously there's been a lot going on. Okay. It was reported prior to the game that Deion Sanders would take the head coaching position at Colorado. He addressed it, if you remember last week, and we talked about this, that he addressed it, that he was offered that job. But then the rumor again, right before the SWAC championship game came out, that said he was going to take the job. So we've had this whirlwind. He has in fact taken the position at Colorado. And there's a couple of different dynamics here that I want to address. And I do encourage you to go to our website at boxtorow.com. I laid this thing out in column form. And so I'd like to really get your thoughts, whether you agree or disagree. I remember going back to March of 2021 when I wrote a piece about Deion Sanders and how things were. It wasn't the most complimentary piece, and I got a lot of feedback on both sides, and we enjoy that. Like, that's why we're here. We're here to have open dialogue. We're here to have debate. You don't always have to agree with me. I'm good. I'm fine with that. And sometimes you may say something that I didn't think about. So please, I encourage you to check out the piece. But I want to let me start here. For those, there's different dynamics to this. You have, to me, three different dynamics with respect to the Deion Sanders situation. You have what I would call the lay dynamic, where people aren't really college football fans, not necessarily HBCU football fans, but because it's Deion Sanders and him leaving an HBCU to go to Colorado, you have people that are hating on that are hating on Coach Sanders with respect to leaving HBCUs to go to a PWI. You have that dynamic. Then you have the dynamic of college football people, generally speaking. And those are the people that generally talk mainstream football, never talk HBCU football, have an opinion, which is fine. You can listen, everybody can have an opinion. And there's those dynamics, the so-called mainstream national people, national shows, writers, etc., that have an opinion. And then you have those that are in HBCU sports that understand the dynamic, and specifically football, that understand that dynamic of how HBCU football works. And of course, those people have an opinion. So I'm going to try to address all three of those. And I think I did in the piece, if you want to read that piece. First of all, the lay people. So to me, those that believe that Deion Sanders leaving Jackson State to go to Colorado, I've seen the word, heard the word sellout used. You're selling out HBCU football. You're selling out Jackson State to go to a PWI, as it's known in the vernacular of HBCUs. That's a misguided thought process, and this is why. There's a mutual understanding between Jackson State and Deion Sanders when he came initially to Jackson State. What Deion Sanders needed was some head coaching experience, or just two things: head coaching and general college experience. He had been a high school coach, a head coach, but never on the collegiate level. So it sort of made his hiring not a head scratcher, but one of those that's like, okay, well, you're hiring a guy that never had head coaching experience. But if you look at what happened that spring season, Jackson State went 4-3. Last year, Jackson State lost 2 football games, one to Louisiana Monroe, the other to South Carolina State, for what amounted to the HBCU National Championship. And then this year, so far, Jackson State has not lost a single football game. So he's had success, and he got the experience and won as he needed to make the next level move. I'm not necessarily saying that he came in and used Jackson State to get to the next level. But look, let's be honest about this thing. If you're at Jackson State or any of the SWAC or MEAC schools, as it currently stands right now, it's a means to an end. In other words, if you win your conference championship, you're going to play in the game in Atlanta, okay? And so that's for the opportunity. Now, again, it's for the opportunity to win the national championship. Listen, there are no guarantees that because you win that game in Atlanta, you're going to be the HBCU national champions. I think that a lot of people believe that game is the HBCU national championship game. It is not the HBCU national game. It just so happens that all of the years that game was played, the HBCU national champion was decided, including last year when South Carolina State won. Now, remember, South Carolina State going into that game against Jackson State last year may have been ranked like 4 or 5. Won the game. It didn't have the best record. It was like 6-5 going into that game. Didn't have the best record. Won that game, and as released by Box to Row through the coaches poll, okay, or the as we call them, the HBCU coaches poll, was named HBCU national champ. So we that's number one. That game is not, because again, as I've always said, if all of your schools aren't represented, particularly, let's just go to the Division I route or the FCS route. Hampton is not in either conference. Tennessee State is not in either conference, and A&T is not in either conference. So how can you have a true, and that doesn't even include the Division II school. So how can you have a true national championship game? That's number one. Okay, but for those that believe that he sold out, or listen, it was a mutual understanding. He went to Jackson State, had the success, did some good things at Jackson State, won some ball games, and then was offered an opportunity at a Power 5 school. Jackson State, on the other hand, received notoriety that it wouldn't ordinarily receive. The SWAC benefited. I mean, if you want to say HBCUs as a whole, probably, because again, when you talk about those, I talked about lay people, that people that are outside of college football and HBCUs definitely are talking. Like, I've listened to a bunch of shows that are not HBCU or college related, that a lot of people are talking about this because it's Deion Sanders, because of who he is. So it was a benefit. I mean, now when I say a benefit directly to other HBCUs, did it bring, let's look at an A&T. Did it bring, because I want to look at, let's look at a successful institution, and then one maybe that is not as successful. When I say successful, I mean winning on the field, in terms of the fan base, et cetera. For an A&T, did it really allow for a better recruiting for A&T because Deion Sanders was at Jackson State? I would say no. Even if I looked at the Delaware State, by the way, Rod Milstead is out, hadn't had a chance to address that. I want to be able to address that, and may address that on the weekend edition of Box to Row, as he's out as the head coach at Delaware State. Hadn't had a chance to address it. Will address it. Maybe doesn't have the great fan base, hasn't had the success, right? Probably didn't really benefit them from players on the field. But to think that he's a sellout because he left Jackson State, again, it's a means to an end. You're going to play for the HBCU National Championship. That's it. Him moving on now to Colorado means he's going to have an opportunity to play for the national championship in all of college football. We got to remember something, guys, especially lay people. It's not like he left Jackson State to go to, for instance, North Dakota State, right? A school that, or even let's look at it. Let's North Dakota State probably is, you talk about great championship teams. North Dakota State is been great. But it's not like he left Jackson State to go to a comparable FCS program that's a PWI. He didn't do that. He went next level. So it's comparing apples and oranges. And again, I'm talking for those that may not understand that. It's comparing apples and oranges. Now he goes to a program where he has an opportunity to play for a national championship at the FBS ranks, or as we call it, and be in the college football playoffs. Now, do I think he'll have success at Colorado? I think eventually he will. Will he win a Pac-12 championship, as we know the Pac-12 to be now? Or will he be able to win a championship, I should say, as we know things to be right now? We'll see. I mean, we'll ultimately see how things are able to play out in this particular scenario. I mean, he's got a lot of work to do. I mean, he had a chance to talk, and you've got established programs. You've got Oregon. You've got USC. Lincoln Riley just coming on the scene with his quarterback Williams. Like, those are established programs, and you're not going to win right away. I don't think you'll have the success that he had at Jackson State. But again, say he's a sellout. I don't agree with that at all. Now, to the college football people, generally speaking, everybody has an opinion. And, I chuckle a little bit because, and I said this in the piece, for all of those mediums, big mediums, I'm not going to name any specific ones, but you know who I'm talking about, so-called mainstream mediums. I want you to keep the same energy with your coverage that you gave Deion Sanders with his time at Jackson State, now that he's not there. I need that same energy and that same coverage when it relates to HBCU football. Okay, you have those people, everybody has an opinion about this, that, and the other, have no really idea about HBCU football. Some that may have an idea, or even there are those that have gone to HBCUs. That's not what you do on a daily basis that have an opinion. It's great. Have your opinion. All I'm saying is give us the same energy that you, with Deion out, that you gave when Deion was in. And it's not just because he left to go to Colorado. They gave energy throughout the course of his time at Jackson State. And that's the notoriety. I mean, you cannot deny the notoriety that Deion Sanders brings, not only to Jackson State, but everywhere he goes, and what he's going to bring to Colorado. So you have that dynamic of it. Great for your opinion. It's great to be, that. And it's not really HBCUs. And I wrote in this piece, listen, it's one person. You cannot allow for one person to be the focal point of HBCU football. There's been too much history. Too many things have happened. And listen, again, those that don't think that HBCU football gets a lot of notoriety, and there are people that are in the three groups I mentioned: lay people, college football people, and HBCU people that don't think, listen, we have to understand that it's an apples and oranges. Yeah, HBCU may not get the same coverage that FBS programs get or Power 5 programs get. And they probably, and who says we should, right? Maybe from a historical standpoint, but I mean, you're talking about, a lot of those guys go on, they play in the league. I mean, if you look at the league, I mean, I don't know the percentage of HBCU players that are it was a low percentage. We know that, but in terms of even non-FBS schools, it's like 10%. So, they're getting that notoriety. I get all of that. But when you talk about SWAC, you talk about MEAC, okay, on that level, and you talk about Tennessee State, Hampton, and A&T, there's a lot of coverage for those schools that are more than the PWIs in the FCS. I mean, for many years, the ESPN's only deals with FCS conferences was with the SWAC and the MEAC. Now that is expanded. But if you look at those Thursday night games and some of the Saturday night games, right, it's only the SWAC and MEAC that have their games broadcast and not any of the PWIs. We got to compare apples and oranges a lot of times in this situation. That said, we cannot, it's unfortunate that we don't get the coverage that the FBS programs get, and certainly the Power 5 programs get, but we get more coverage, as much or more than the PWIs on our same level, whether that's at the FCS level or at the Division II levels. We got to compare apples and oranges, and that's more for the lay people. 3, let's address the people that are inside of HBCU football that are in the know, right? I mean, listen, we a lot of us understand what it is, and you got to understand, I know Jackson State had to have understood this. This train wasn't going to last forever. It was a mutual understanding between both Jackson State and Deion Sanders. Jackson State got an inordinate amount of coverage. The SWAC got an inordinate amount of coverage that it normally would not have gotten. But I also want to see the same energy and from HBCU mediums covering HBCU. A lot of HBCU mediums, I think, popped up when Deion Sanders popped up, right? Even some of those, that have been around, a lot more coverage, need to see that same energy now that Deion Sanders is moving on from Jackson State. So those are those 3 dynamics. His time at Jackson State was controversial in a lot of respects. It's why I wrote the piece I wrote last year, addressing some of the incendiary things that he was saying. Now, since that time, he's calmed down a little bit. However, we did have an incident where and I want to address him, how his presence overshadowed HBCU and Jackson State and a lot of times. But listen, he had a plane waiting for him after the SWAC championship game to take him to Colorado for an introductory press conference where he also addressed the team in a separate meeting, which you can find that on social media. Whereas he did not show up for it was a packed room of media waiting. My understanding is maybe about 40 to 50 medium people in the room waiting for him to come to talk to the media, as you do after a football game or after a championship game on the collegiate, on all levels, collegiately, professionally. That's what happens. He did not come and address them. Okay, he did not address the media. He almost, from my understanding, was not on stage to accept the trophy as the SWAC champion. Okay, because he had to hurry up and get out of there. And by the way, haven't seen the video yet, but have been alerted. I was told by multiple people that this is what happened. He had a plane waiting. He was in very much a rush. Almost didn't come to the championship trophy celebration and did not address the media because he had to catch a flight. Told by many people, and there's video to confirm how much of a rush that he was in. So you have that dynamic as well. That's controversial. He had at best misunderstandings with other coaches in the SWAC, and I say misunderstanding. I'm using that. That's at best. A lot of things that he said over these 2 years now, 3 seasons, 2 years as the head coach, really incendiary, almost in my opinion, and I wrote about this, downing HBCUs in a lot of respects. Now he hasn't done that or hadn't done that as much, but I think his actions after the game spoke to me. Remember the whole I'm SWAC thing with him and Eddie Robinson, the head coach at Alabama State, and remember when Eddie Robinson said, "I'm SWAC." He ain't SWAC. I'm SWAC, right? And then Deion mocked him afterwards, said, "No, I'm SWAC." Well, not showing up for the SWAC, almost not showing up for the SWAC championship trophy presentation, and not showing up to the media. That ain't SWAC. Okay, so you can say what you want. I think a lot of times over the time, he overshadowed a lot of situations. Like, look at what we're talking about. We're not even talking, and I'm not even talking about lay people outside of college and outside, and specifically outside of HBCUs. I'm talking about folks even inside that aren't even talking about the SWAC championship game, which Jackson State won. No, we're talking about this whole thing with Deion Sanders. So a lot of times he overshadowed his presence. That's not his fault. Okay, he's Deion Sanders. I get it. But his presence overshadowed a lot of things that happened in HBCU sports because it was all about Deion. And that's one of the things that we have to be very, very careful about. One person cannot make HBCU sports and HBCU football. Okay. Listen, I hope now that he's leaving, and by the way, it remains to be, he says he's going to coach in the game in Atlanta against North Carolina Central, who has a really good football team. A lot of questions there. Ashley Robinson hasn't said he was going to coach. He's the athletics director at Jackson State. And how do you do that? Like, you can't, I don't think you could put your full emphasis on Jackson State that week or for the 2-week preparation when you have another coaching situation at Colorado. Now, assistants can handle things, but what if there's something that comes up that requires him to be a part of that? He's got to leave that situation. I'm not saying going to Colorado, but he has to take time away from the preparation to go and do that. Can you really do that? Right? Reportedly, Deion Sanders, Travis Hunter, others are in the transfer portal, stars of this team. I don't know I hadn't had a chance to look it up. If you're in the transfer portal, can you now play in a season, a game with the team, the program you're leaving? I don't think so. I'm not 100% sure about that. So look, there's a lot of questions that still need to really be answered as it relates to this whole situation. Again, when you talk about HBCU football, there's a great history in HBCU sports. There's a great history with it. To those lay people, I hope now that you will continue to follow HBCU football and HBCU sports. Maybe you've learned something along the way about the history. Some of the greatest players, and if you didn't know, let me tell you, some of the greatest players to ever play in the National Football League, some of the great, not as many, but some of the great NBA players, some Major League Baseball players, track and field, and then even outside of sports, when you're talking about great people, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., Oprah Winfrey, Thurgood Marshall, the list goes on and on. If you want to talk about outside of, even outside of that world, if you want to talk about in the entertainment world, Chadwick Boseman, P. Diddy, Anthony Anderson, and many, many more went to HBCU. So there's a history already there. And there are some great ones that are in those realms now that came out of HBCUs, whether it's in the NFL, whether it's in Miss Kamala Harris is the vice president of the United States. So for those that don't understand that, past, present, future, greatness comes out of HBCUs. Okay, we got to be careful that one person can we have to be careful that the focus is not on one person, as I think it was in a lot of respects. A lot of people says, well, he brought a lot of notoriety to HBCUs. Okay, maybe. Yes. I guess yes. But when he's gone, what now? Are you still going to be there? Lay people, are you still going to be there? Are you still going to have an understanding of what's going on? Are you going to follow some of these people? That's what I'm sort of interested to see. We got to be careful, that there's one person. It has to be a collective of people that have an interest in HBCU football, specifically sports broadly. So, that sort of would be my thought. Again, had a chance to really lay this thing out, gave you a bunch of thoughts on this edition of the HBCU Football Daily Podcast. Give me your thoughts. You can hit me up a couple of different ways. On Box to Row, on Twitter at Box to Row, BoxTorow. On my personal Twitter account at DWare1, and let's have or continue this conversation. If you hit me up, if you're respectful, I will address you whether you agree with me or not. If you're respectful, I definitely will. I basically hit everybody back. Now, if you're disrespectful, I don't address disrespectfulness. But if you're respectful, whether you agree with me or not, I'm going to definitely get back to you. Again, on my Twitter account at DWare1, or on the Box to Row Twitter account at Box to Row. Listen, we got a lot going on here. We got report cards. If you listen to our show, Box to Row on ESPNU Radio on Sirius XM, which airs each Friday, 6 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Central Time, and 3 p.m. Pacific Time on ESPNU Radio on Sirius XM. That's channel 84. I gave my thoughts on Savannah State and gave the grades for all of the teams from Savannah State. Over the next couple of weeks, I'm going to be giving grades to the teams from the MEAC, to the teams from the CIAA, and to the teams from the SWAC, as well as to Tennessee State, A&T, and Hampton. West Virginia State, Lincoln of Missouri. You got quite, Florida Memorial's quite a few teams. So check that out on our show over the next couple of weeks. Matter of fact, I think what we'll do is post the grades to our website at boxrow.com, and then tell you why we gave the grade that we gave. Also, speaking of coaches, okay, I want to put this bug in your ear, and this is probably not only for lay people. This is probably for the other two groups I mentioned, which are college football people and then HBCU people who are into HBCU sports. So from the research I've done, and I'm happy to be corrected, there's only been one HBCU grad or HBCU alum that had become a head football coach at an FBS institution, and that was Willie Jeffries at Wichita State, going back to the late 70s to the early to mid 80s, okay? Hadn't been one since. There is one, if there hadn't been another one. There is one now currently. Charles Huff is the head football coach at Marshall. Marshall has had a really good season, 8-4 on the season, defeated Notre Dame. Remember, that was a big deal going back to the second week of the season, and will be in a bowl game. Charles Huff, the head football coach at Marshall, is a Hampton grad, and he's going to join us this week on Box to Row. You don't want to miss that, because I want to talk with him about what it means to be an HBCU grad and a coach at an FBS institution, since he's only the second one ever, according to the research that I've done. I'm happy to be corrected if you know something that's a little bit different. So I'm really excited to have him on. We're going to close the season out as we do the last couple of weeks on the Box to Row programs on a radio station near you, as well as on Sirius XM with our year-end review shows, where we run back some of the great conversations that we've had over the course of the year. So a lot going on here, and we want you to be a part of it at Box to Row. And for more information on what we do at Box to Row, you can log on to our website at boxtorow.com. Also, I encourage you to read the piece that I wrote about this whole situation. The title of the piece, as a matter of fact, is called a parting shot for prime time. A parting shot for prime time. So I invite you to check that out. Don't forget to tell a couple of friends about the HBCU Football Daily Podcast, where you can find us on our website at boxtorow.com. Also, wherever you may get your podcast, and iHeartMedia.com, and watching on the Box to Row YouTube page. Talk with you real soon.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of the HBCU Football Daily Podcast. You can also listen to the podcast at boxtorow.com, iHeartMedia, or wherever you get your podcasts. Don't forget to get your HBCU football fix on Box to Row with Donal Ware each weekend on the radio station near you, and on Sirius XM on HBCU Channel 142, and on ESPNU Radio on Sirius XM Channel 84. Follow us on Twitter and Instagram at Box to Row for the latest in HBCU football, and don't forget to tell a friend.